My name is Primrose Igonor. I will be
This
the
meeting is being recorded.
facilitator of the discussion. I am the director of the Connection Center Belonging and Equity at Marian Technical College. I'm happy that Linda went through the list to see if we have any newbies. And before we start, I just wanted to discuss and talk about my first experience with Win, which happened to be at a movie discussion. It was a Friday night. I had nothing to do, so I Googled stuff to do. And I came across Worthington Interfaith Neighbors. I live in Delaware, by the way, and they talked about the Mac, and I'm like, oh, I've never been to that theater, and this movie sounds interesting. It was the movie Bread, and since then I have been hooked. So yes, Salma. Salma seems to be raising her hand. Okay, if you have any questions, please pop them in chat. So it was a movie Bread, and ever since I was hooked. So I go from being a casual person walking into the theater to now being the facilitator of this movie discussion. Typically, what we would do is we would be eating first before we actually go and watch the movie. So let me test people's memory of the movie. What food did you see in the movie? What could we be dining on right now if we were in person? How many people saw the roast pig?
Yes.
Right? That all looks so delicious. And so hopefully next year we'll be back in person. And I must say, everybody is looking tip top from the waist up. Dare I ask you to stand up and show me from the waist down? I don't. So I'm going to start off with a blurb about the movie, and then I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who will give us a spiel for about 15 minutes. I'll then introduce our second speaker. They will do the same, and then we will open up for discussion. I have some pre-set questions, but everybody has watched the movie, and I'm sure they're eager to share what insights they had. So we're definitely going to have a chance to do that. So Gran Torino. Clint Eastwood's character Walt is a lapsed Catholic, widower, estranged from his family, whose only real connection is with his Gran Torino car. He is a bigot living in a racially diverse neighborhood. Somehow his life is changed by an unlikely relationship with his Hmong neighbors, whose faith, family, and culture are about as different from Walt's as possible. So, our first discussant for today's discussion is the Reverend Dr. Linda Mercante, PhD from Princeton. She's a distinguished research professor emerita at Methodist Theology Seminary of Ohio. Her interdisciplinary work focuses on how faith and culture intersect. She also teaches film studies and has been leading film discussion groups for decades. The author of 5 books and scores of articles, her latest is Belief Without Borders Inside the Minds of the Spiritual but Not Religious. There is a difference. She founded healthybeliefs.org in order to bring her research to a wide variety of publics. As an internationally known public speaker, she has been featured on NBC's The Today Show, The New York Times, WOSU, and many other outlets. As a longtime Worthington resident, she is married to Joseph Maas, recently installed as vice mayor, and they have 3 children. So over to you, Linda.
Thank you, Primrose, very much. This film, Gran Torino, is not what it seems on the surface. If you watch it once and sorry, okay, I got muted. Now I'm unmuted. All right. Anyway, if you watch Gran Torino, in your house when you're getting up and down and getting dinner and stuff, you probably would get a first impression. And I think the first impression would be that the movie has a lot of death in it, or mentions a lot of death. So I want to go through about 5 themes, and the most important one will be the last one. So why would you get the impression that it's about death? Well, you start with Walt Kowalski's wife died, and there's even a funeral there. And then you find out more about Walt, that he fought in a war, in a Korean War in Asia, and he killed young Asians. So that's he feels guilty about that. That's death. Um, When we meet the Hmong family, there's Thao, and uh, Tao's father and his sister's father, of course, has died. So that there's a question about whether he has a male figure in his life. Then we have a death not of a person, but of the old neighborhood that Walt lived in. It would look like Detroit, I'd say. It's definitely Michigan. It was filmed in Michigan because Walt was in the auto industry, and that was very big in Michigan at one time. But instead it's on the dying side, and the neighborhood has completely changed. So Walt doesn't feel comfortable because the neighborhood seems to have died to the way he knew it. Then there's the death of the auto industry, which Walt depended on, although fortunately he seems to have retired. So that seems to be a big point. And when we meet the priest, the Catholic priest, he seems to immediately pick up on the theme of death. And it's like seems to think that Walt cares a lot about the afterlife and where his wife may have gone after her death. And so in the sermon and in the eulogy that's happening in the funeral, the priest seems to really care or thinks that everyone cares about heaven and hell, and that this woman, went to the right place. Walt doesn't seem to care about that at all, but the priest seems to think he should. Um, in fact, Walt later on really kind of disses his religion. He's lapsed all right, but worse than lapsed, he kind of thinks it's all silly, and he thinks that the priest is just somebody who takes advantage of, quote, superstitious old women. In other words, telling them about heaven. Um, and in fact, the only thing that seems to last is his car, the Gran Torino. So Walt seems to think that that's his symbol of longevity, is that he's kept this car, which I don't know the year of that Gran Torino, but obviously it was a lot older than the new immigrants that came to the neighborhood. But everyone seems to know that it's a Gran Torino and that it's a classic, and seems to like it. Okay, so death and the afterlife. Those aren't the main themes but they're the superficial themes. Then another theme, which is more subtle but very interesting, is masculinity. So did you catch the theme of masculinity in there? Walt is very traditional and very male centric. For one thing, he seems to see smoking as a proof of manhood. He doesn't say it, but he does a lot of it. And in fact, he's dying of lung cancer. If you notice, obviously, he was coughing up blood. So, besides the Gran Torino being a symbol of his masculinity, and that he's a factory worker, he also seems to have other male attributes like tools, smoking, things like that. So, what about Tao, his neighbor, this younger guy? Well, he thinks Tao is not a real man. So he's trying to teach him how to be a man, cursing, trash talking, knowing how to use tools, getting a job in construction. So he's trying to make Tao, who Tao's community doesn't seem to worry about his masculinity. They said, oh, he'll be okay. He'll be the leader of the family like he should. Because Tao is gardening and stuff. And Walt is like, no, you're doing all these girl things. So it's very, very traditional view of masculinity. Um, and the gangs also are trying to prove their masculinity. They're all guys, and they're trying to prove their masculinity by being rough and tough and in charge and all that. So actually, Walt and the gangs have the similar understanding of masculinity, tough, strong, even violent. Now, what about the priest? The priest, clearly, Walt doesn't respect the priest. He thinks he's just this young kid out of seminary. He knows nothing about life and death. And I think the priest feels a little uncomfortable. And if you notice, he takes his clerical collar off, puts on regular clothes, meets Walt in a bar, and has a regular drink. So I think he's like, trying to prove, his masculinity, not real successful at it. What about community? That's a theme. Walt doesn't have one. They all moved away. Now the Hmong people are creating a community for each other, so that's good. The priest is still trying to have community, and because Walt's wife said you got to stick with Walt, you got to watch over him, make him go to confession, take care of him. Walt thinks this is completely ridiculous because this kid is right out of seminary, so he has one. He wants nothing to do with it. Walt's estranged from his family, so he doesn't even have that community. And his family's not all that fuzzy wuzzy with Walt either. They seem to resent him and the way he raised them. It's not specific, but poor Walt, he doesn't feel part of the Hmongs. He doesn't probably want to. It's not his family. He's really alone. Community is not what he gets, and the priest is the only one that offers him anything. And it takes a long time for Walt to agree that that this priest has anything to offer. But here's the most important theme. Sorry, violence and redemption. Well, I mean, Christianity is about redemption. It really is. But there's a mistaken idea that redemption comes through violence. Now, there's plenty of violence in the movie, but Catholic theology does not insist that, or does not even claim that violence is what redeems you. But when I taught film studies to my students, and even my husband, who's right there, said this, when Walt is eventually killed, he lands with his arms like this. So my husband and my student would go, Christ figure, Christ figure. And so there's a stereotypical understanding that Christianity teaches that you need violence to save yourself and others. And that is not good theology. It's not good Catholic theology. It's not good Protestant theology. It's not good Christian theology. But what is redemption? Is redemption just about second chances? It has nothing to do with death and life. Walt is dying, so there's no second chances for Walt. So that can't be it. Is it something about the afterlife? Walt doesn't seem to believe in it, so that doesn't seem to be it. Well, if he could be redeemed, what would he be redeemed from? Would he be redeemed from his past violence toward Asians and clearly he's prejudiced against Asians? Would he be redeemed from that? He's dying. We don't have a lot of time here to get over our racism. What about his broken relationships with his family? That doesn't look like he's going to change. They try and they give up and he doesn't care, so that doesn't look like it. What about going to confession? Is that going to redeem him? He had a lot to confess, but he chose some real minor, trivial things. So for him, even the ritual, which is supposed to lead to redemption, he doesn't respect it. He did it because the priest was insistent and he promised Walt's wife. So I guess Walt, out of just a tad of respect, allowed him to administer confession. So what are we looking for here? What kind of redemption is this? If it's just about second chances, Thao can be redeemed, and Thao, in fact, does get second chances. Walt saves him a whole number of times, and as well as his sister, they get the chance to live a life in America. And Thao ends up with the car and the dog, and driving down the road, and Thao tries to copy Walt's masculinity, so he is kind of given second chances in Detroit. But is that all redemption's about from a religious perspective? So what's the big question? To me, the big question is, does Christianity say you need violence to be saved, to be redeemed, to have second chances? Is that a necessary condition? When some people would mistakenly call Clint Eastwood in this movie Walt a Christ figure, it doesn't work that well. Yes, he dies with his hands out. Okay, Christ died, on a cross. Yes, there's violence, but what's different about it is that there may be elements of him being a Christ figure, but he doesn't fit the pattern, because what Christian theology teaches is that Christ was without sin. In other words, he didn't do anything wrong. Walt is full of sin. He's estranged from everybody. He killed people. That doesn't work. But is there something about Walt that does make him a Christ figure, if we have to use that image? Because I think Clint Eastwood was actually saying that. After all, this is the culmination of the Clint Eastwood genre of movies. He had violence in all of them. He was often the bad guy. In this case, he acts tough, but he doesn't turn out to be the violent bad guy this time. This time, he turns out to sacrifice himself for the good of others. That is what a Christ figure does. I think Clint Eastwood did know that and was trying to say that. He saves Tao's sister from the gangs. He interrupts violence that could happen to Thao. The neighbors think, the Hmong think he's really, I mean, I don't know if I could say godlike, but I mean, they really honor him with food, and also they think he's self-sacrificing. So in the end, is he a Christ figure? Is violence necessary for redemption? From a Christian point of view, no. Violence is not what redemption takes. It's not what it takes to be, quote, saved. What it does take is you, is a person emulating Christ by sacrificing themselves, and it doesn't have to mean to death, but just sacrificing their own good for somebody else's good. And Clint Eastwood did do that. He sacrificed himself all the way to death, but he knew he was dying anyway. He knew that the gangs were going to do what they did because he was part of that culture. That was his masculinity. He could read them like a book. He knew, and he in the end knew that that this would they would the cops would come. They'd arrest these gang members. They'd go to jail, and then Thao and his family would be saved from that kind of violence, at least from those gangs. So in a way, Clint Eastwood is like a scapegoat. Is a scapegoat rather than a violent figure in this movie, which is a little unusual for him. So is he a Christ figure? A little bit, kind of. Does he teach us something? He teaches us that you can sacrifice yourself for the good of others, and that would be a Christian principle. So in the end, he does actually teach something that would come from Christianity, even though he seemed to have rejected his religion. So something went inside of him that he wasn't aware of, and he acted it out. So in a way, his attendance at church or his being with his wife, who probably talked about Christianity, the priest following him, somehow it rubbed off. And that's what Walt did. Walt ended up being actually an actual good Catholic without having to go through the rituals and, show up at church and all that. Something rubbed off on him, and he did save other people. So I don't know if I used up my time, but that's it.
Thank you so much, Linda. You touched on so many themes that you were able to weave together. So I was aware of all these things, but in dissected places. So thank you for your presentation, because, like I say, it just brought things together. I'd put there in chat, if you have any questions, in case you forget your questions, please drop them in chat. We will go through them afterwards. And while you're doing that, I'd like to introduce our second discussant, who is Tom Ma. He grew up in South Vietnam, where he completed 7th grade. In 1984, he set out on a journey as a scout for his entire family to escape from communist-controlled Vietnam. As one of the boat people, he captained a boat holding 39 people, including 3 of his brothers, and arrived in the US in January 1985 after a dangerous sea voyage. Tom and his brothers were sponsored by a younger brother who left Vietnam a year before. While taking ESL classes, he earned his GED certificate and then graduated with a BS in aeronautical engineering in 1993. He later earned an MA in computer networking and worked for various organizations, including Ernst & Young and a number of hospitals. He has also worked with different charity and volunteer groups, including Asian American Community Services, AACS. And Tom ends his bio by saying the following: life is very interesting. Sometimes things go well, nice and smooth, while at other times they're rough, like an angry ocean. I think that ties in very well with the movie. So over to you, Tom.
Hello, everyone. Yes, that's already. I already got introduced. So basically, I just go on. I have 15 minutes to go. I will, if to say whatever that my experience in the country. So basically, I came here as a boat people in 1985, and then at first I came from another country, from Asia. And over here, it's a completely different, a lot different, the culture different, the behavior different, everything different. Even the faith of the religion also a little bit different, because the influence of the people and other religion. basically I am also Catholic. Just happened I am Catholic.
Oh.
But you know, I mean, it's, as Linda said in the movie, a lot of things that's related. I myself, a lot of things agree, and also some does not agree. You know, what we talk about. The experience. Go back to the experience when I first stepped in the country. It just happened. I came to the Bronx, in the Bronx, New York, and lived in an area where very close to the Burnside and also the Jerome Avenue. Just because when I first landed here, just happened the agency rent apartment for me there, and then I go on from there. Just happened. So it's a lot of experience, very related to the movie with the Hmong people. And I think it's not just the Hmong people, but most the immigrant that live in many other cities. Just basically, it's hard because the living we have to fight for a living. I remember I make it $4.25 per hour, and you have to pay for everything. You have to have a car, you have to have a rent apartment, you know, eating and everything else, insurance, everything else. So it's not easy. And then I mean, and on top of that, you have to watch every minute you walk out the street. You have to watch the front and the back, and even I get robbed, I get mugged. So it's very at the time. I think it's just the area where we live. It's very it just happened. Not like the police force to be able to do anything. And sometimes we really get harmed, very bad. Now we're talking about the people where as you see in the movie, and very realistic. The Asian people, the culture, and in general, most of the country, they normally in the country, like me and our family and our friend, we don't stick together a lot, whole lot. We do, but not a lot. What happened is because we came to another country, and then because many races, many other type of people, we tend to get together, know each other, and get together more frequently. And then because you choose the party like birthday and many other party just to get together. So what they do it in they print a lot of food. Everybody print their own food and enjoy. Of course, it's a lot of good food for them. I mean, a lot of food that the American people never try. I think they know by now, but not at that time. So I mean, it's a culture, and then the regardless. I mean, you see the at the time people don't know much of the knowledge. They come here like us. I'm suffering more, a tremendous amount of the threat. I mean, I don't have the knowledge to apply. Not too many people have to do things in normal life, and then basically I have to do my own. There's a time I need legal ad. There's no legal because I don't know who to get into. Because every time you go a legal service, they're going to charge you $100 or something. I don't have the money. So I think similar to everyone else that the immigrant people come over here. It's really hard for immigrant people without organization. The people now I experience that they do need help. Like, for example, right now I do many work to help the community. So whatever the knowledge I gained for the last 30, 40 years, I try to help people. I try to transfer over to the newcomer. But I did not have that opportunity before. And beside that, now we tend to live in a better area. We learn more. It fit more for us. It's not like before. So the movie is real. I mean, the movie, I have to say that my experience is very similar. I got robbed 3 times. One time they framed me into the corner and they took my wallet. The other two times I was robbed. I asked the taxi driver. I went to college at daytime and drive taxi at night. And the guy behind me, when I pick up the passenger, he's not a passenger. He stick the knife in behind me and take my wallet twice. And in the Bronx. So I mean, you have to go through life like that. I mean, it's really bad, but we have no choice. At the time, I don't think people have choice. And then, among that, because also this is another thing that what happened is because of the young kid, the young age, came to the United States, they have no guidance, no support. What happened is these are 13, 14, 15 years old, they all came together and they found more comfortable to do bad thing, to do violent thing, team up, harass people, do things like that to support for themselves. Okay, it does not last long, but during that happen, people suffering. Many people, many immigrant people were suffering. I remember I have a few people that I know come from the BTK, the BTK from the New York City at the time, 1985. And two of them died because they get killed, one by police and one by the gangster. The other one went to jail and he came back. After the jail, and he said to me, he said that, Tan, you know what? From now on, I'm a good person. I can do anything to get out of jail, because when you're in jail, they rape you, men rape you one after another. You can't take it. I can't take that. Nobody can take that. It's very bad. So that's what I heard from him. So basically, I mean, at the time, people have no education and no attention. Kid, 15, 14, what I said, become gangster. It not much now, no longer exists, but at the time, it's happened a lot. So, I mean, it is in the movie. The way I see the movie, they talk about focus on the death after life and superstitious, and also the Catholic faith. I mean, because he's what is Catholic? I mean, it's just the movie, the scene itself. I think if you look overall, you see the movie, the end of the movie. What did a very good job. I mean, he tried to help, to help people by doing things, like sacrifice himself, and I mean, he did help people, help the Hmong people, even the people he didn't like it. He's a racist. He's the one of the racist people, but in the end, he helped those people. So basically, he did a good job. But to me, the frame, the picture, or the act, it does not had nothing to do with Christ. And I agree with Linda. If any Christianity, it is nothing to do with the way he acting like this. No, it just happened in the movie. And then is it people say, oh yeah, Christ figure? No, I don't think so. It just happened. I mean, but he meant something. It's mean he did find a way to get killed to help other people. But redemption does not need the violation of violence. To me, redemption in many way in life, don't have to be violent to get redemption. So you can be happy people, can be a smile, can be a small things, it just the movie very, very, very good. I mean, to me, as an immigrant, I think it really, 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 if you really look into the movie in depth, it does talk about the culture, and nowadays the immigrant not much no longer stick together like that anymore, no longer. They don't do anymore. They do a larger scale in terms of organization, like big event, celebration like New Year or big other events, and like us, we do a lot of legal things, clinic, and translation, and senior option. We do many other bigger scale on the education level, on the medical level, and many on the legal level. So I think what was then a very, very good movie, but very, very, it really Clint Eastwood, he did a very, very good director.
Thank you very much, Tom. I am particularly excited about you sharing about the lives of immigrants then and now. And I hope we'll be able to discuss that later on. So at this point, I am going to open up for questions. Like I say, I have preset questions, but I feel the energy in the room and I think people want to ask questions. So I'm going to open it up to the audience. You can ask a general question. You can ask Linda or Tom specific questions. So over to you. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can put it in chat and I'll read it out. And Nashma, maybe we can start with you because you had put in chat, did I receive your questions?
Yes, thank you, Primrose. My question was that Walt appears to be a very empathetic person. He finds it very easy once he starts trying to become friendly with the Hmong community. He goes to their place. He shares their food with them. He appreciates that. He puts himself out to help the brother and the sister. And I was just wondering, what kept him so aloof from his own family? What was it that, and obviously his wife was a very nice person. So what was it that stopped him from developing a closer relationship with his own children when he had the ability in him to be so empathetic and so become so close and so friendly with people from another community with whom he was not very, to whom he was not very well inclined at the beginning? The old woman who would sit on her porch, the Hmong woman, and when he was sitting on his porch, they would be very antagonistic towards each other. And it was when he first helped that boy that they started becoming friendly. So my question is, why did he not display the same empathy towards his own family? What kept him back? Thank you.
Okay, I see Marilyn had raised her hand.
Yeah, thanks. And by the way, thank you. This is the first time I'm part of this group, so I appreciate the opportunity. It seems to me that he called his family, he called his children spoiled. And so we have an indication of one of the things that distanced himself from his children. And the opening scene at the funeral, his grandchildren were not particularly respectful, so that you could see some distance there. And also what started him taking interest in Thao rather, is that he saw him help the neighbor. The woman came home with bags of groceries and they spilled, and a couple of teenage boys went past, did not offer to help, and in fact made an obscene gesture. But his neighbor ran across the street, talked to the woman, helped her gather her things. And that's where he said, oh, look at that. And you could imagine that his own sons might not have done that.
Thank you so much for that reminder, Marilyn. Absolutely, yes, I totally agree with that. And I think it also speaks to the idea of not stereotyping individuals. Those boys who were disrespectful, who did not help the neighbor, were also Hmong. Thao is Hmong. but he helped. And so when we interact with people from different cultures and different races, we have to look at individuals within stereotypes. Because if you miss that part, you miss the opportunity to connect with somebody on a one-to-one basis, which is what I love about WIN. Coming and being part of WIN has allowed me to connect with people that maybe I ordinarily would not connect with. And now I see a different side of what I would have expected. I see, Daniel, you're raising your hand. Please go ahead.
Yes, I have a cousin who was in special forces for 21 years, very, very tough guy, but he always emphasized honor. He was what we call an E8, a very high-ranking soldier, but he said a soldier must have honor. I noticed that Tom had said that he had a strong moral code, a soldier's code. However, Walt violated that code once, maybe twice. A young enemy soldier was trying to surrender, and he said, I shot him in the face, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about that. A young teenager, he shot him in the face. And the other thing is, he would call them zipperheads. And I thought, what's that? I thought I heard all of the derogatory names, and I looked it up. In Korea, soldiers would drive their Jeep over the dead bodies of the other soldiers, and the tracks that it would make on them looks like a zipper. So I called them zipperheads. That is not in the code of honor at all. So Walt he carried this with him all the time. Dishonorable soldier. He understood that he had sinned as a soldier. And he carried that with him all the time. And that may be one of the reasons that he did not connect with his boys. You know, as his boys got to be teenagers, they looked like the guy he just shot. So it may have been something like that.
Incredible. This is why I love these movie discussions. Thank you for looking up that saying, because I kept wondering. I don't know why I just didn't go to Google. Joseph is next.
Yes, thank you very much, Primrose. I'm Linda's husband, so she's referred to me a couple of times, and I wanted to have the opportunity to respond and add to something, because we had not discussed, Linda and I had not discussed the scene where he goes to confession. And Linda observed that what he ended up confessing were really superficial, minor things. Maybe, at least I think in passing, he mentioned about the relationship with his children, but which is not minor, but certainly not about whatever transgressions he felt that he had engaged in Korea. However, I wanted to mention that, you know, for a lapsed Catholic, just going to confession is a huge deal, and believing, particularly if you were raised as a Catholic as a child, that if you forget to confess something, you're still forgiven that sin by merely attending confession. And there may have been something passing. I know that's what crossed my mind when that scene came. So I appreciated Linda bringing that up, and I wanted to share with you my own impression as a man of a similar age of what it would feel like to go to confession at that point in his life. I continue to disagree with Linda concerning the Christ figure image, and I think Clint Eastwood has been known to include subtle images in his films. However, I think in this case he wanted to be very obvious that he had sacrificed himself so that others may live, and that was the reason that he happened to die with this. Or it's a movie after all. with his arms outstretched. Let's not forget, those of you that follow the Clint Eastwood films, and I think as a director, he's unique. I think he was referenced, Linda told me that it was referenced recently as one of the last Hollywood directors of his type, of his style. But there was a previous movie, The Unforgiven, that he also directed and starred in, that was also not subtle. And that involved redemption, that he had killed, quote unquote, everything that crawled or moved at some point in his life. And this movie was supposed to be, Gran Torino was supposed to be his last film. And of course it wasn't, because we've seen him in 2 or 3 other films after that. But I wanted to just add that I am not abandoning my position concerning the crass figure. I think that was intended. I think that he did it to make it obvious to everybody else. And I enjoyed the movie. Interestingly, we saw the movie twice, and I enjoyed it far more the first time than the second time. I'm not sure why. Usually it's the other way around, but I'll just leave that on the table. So thank you, and certainly both commentators were wonderful. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joseph. And before I ask Linda to respond, because I think the way we can put this issue to rest is what I had suggested earlier on. What are the mechanics involved in being shot at like that? How would you fall? I think somebody needs to do research in that, because you might fall in that Christ-like figure, and that's basically what it is. There's no analogy, there's no symbolism attached to it. So hopefully, maybe Linda, in one of your papers, a research paper topic, how about that? But before we move on to other questions, did Linda or Tom have any response to that particular question? Again, Walt obviously had the ability to empathize and befriend others. Why was his relationship with his own son so broken?
I think it was his hypermasculinity. That's how he was raised. That's what he expected a man should be like. And he had the good side of the masculinity. It wasn't just the rough side like the gangs. You know, he had the compassionate or the helpful side at least. But I think he thought his kids were just, they had it too easy. And, you know, maybe he blamed his wife. Who knows, right? But I don't think he thought they were tough enough. So he wanted Thao to be tougher and he could start over again training somebody to be a man.
I think the question it's very hard to tell why the family broken down, but and he gets closer to the different people, the Hmong people. Basically, I mean, sometimes I see family broken down because they're not together because many conflict in the family been there for years, and they never get resolved. And meantime, he lived next to the neighbor, and then because many things happen one day after another, day by day, and he's seen different acting from the boy, different things happen, he start getting involved. And normally, when you get involved, either you get a bad environment or you get a good environment. In this case, the whole life, he was the not a good person. Now, I think he is trying to do something good for himself. And then go on and keep going on, and then he get into the end of it. But I think it just happened. It's nothing related to between why he's not good. He doesn't have a good relationship with the family, but with the neighbor, or with the all the racist people that he didn't like. So I think just happened because the end of life, he got so many problems during the service, and now the end of it, he regretted, and he see number of good things from the neighbor, and that because of that, he changing his thought, changing his attitude, and it's just to become a good person. And what happened is, because he's the man, I'm the man, so I want to do a good thing. I want to do something that's good, and that's usually that I think that the scene, and then that's what happened.
Tom, I must say, I think I agree with you. It takes one person being kind to you to bring out the good in you. his neighbors were kind to him, they cared for him, they noticed that he was coughing blood, and that just touched him. So you do good to others, you do to others what you receive from them. So I like that point. Are there any questions? Yes,
have one.
Linda.
I guess it's a question, but an observation that I made. Because he had cancer, and I mean, yeah, we didn't have a diagnosis. We don't know that that's what it was, but it certainly looked that way. And I guess as I was watching it, I kept saying, he's giving, it's like he wanted to make up for what he had done in his life. And that he knew that his life was coming to an end, regardless of how that end came. And that he would rather go out helping to kind of reprieve what he had done in his life and go out in that way. So I guess that's how I saw that more when I watched it. So what do you two think?
I think that's a very strong point. But he wasn't trying to do good to his family. I mean, they were kind of phony, really, and putting him down, and they were ageist against him. But I mean, they brought him a phone and they tried this and that, and he could have done better right then and said he was sorry, he was tough on them or whatever, but he didn't. So
No.
it was something about the other type of people that came along that he was able to be good with. So I don't know if he was just repenting and trying to change his life, because he didn't change it ever towards his family.
It's true.
My thought is that he was a kind of a black and white guy who had two different criteria for people. You were either a user or a giver. And I think he viewed his family as users. And I think that Marilyn really hit on something when she said it sort of changed when he saw the boy pick up the groceries for the person in the street. And so that put him in a different category and made him maybe take a little closer look. And then they all began to behave in a way that was more empathetic toward him and more showed more of a giving nature. I don't know. I know it's simplistic to say it that way, but and I don't think that Walt necessarily viewed himself as a terrible person. He, again, the manly thing, he supported a family. He went to work. He went to war. He earned a living. He built a house, in a manly way. Those are all very positive points.
Absolutely. Salma, I see Salma's hand up.
I agree. I think he had a moral code that was very strong, and whether that had its origins in his his early Catholic years or not, ultimately, through that moral code was something that came through, because over and over and over again, he rose to the occasion when injustice was happening.
Thank you, Ellen. Salma, you had your hand up. And just make sure you unmute yourself.
Hello?
Unmute. No, Salma. You've got to unmute. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's almost the same thing that we would really never know why he wasn't close to his family. There could be 1,000 reasons for him not being close to the family. And the point is, he probably didn't know until he saw the family next door, how closely they were interacting with each other, and how how they were attached to each other, how they were respecting each other, and something was stirred in him by watching all that, and probably it made him think that he really missed out on a lot of things when it comes to family relationships. And that's when I think he started changing. And I mean, going into why he wasn't close to, why his kids were not close to him and he wasn't close to kids. I mean, there could be a million reasons for that. So that's all I wanted to say. You know, it just the family next door that moved him in certain ways, and he started seeing things that he never ever before saw or felt. You know, being close to people, caring, and attaching to people. And I don't think that it has anything to do with spirituality. Even a non-spiritual, non-religious person can go through this process too.
Thank you, Salma. So basically, that issue with his family is a whole other movie, right?
Yeah.
Dig into that. So I'm going to give a chance to somebody we haven't heard from. I think it's Umida. Yumida. Can you?
Hi, yeah. Hello.
Hello.
I'm new to, Win movie discussions, and I have
Welcome.
enjoyed the discussion even more than the movie. That's what I can say. And as a Muslim and as someone who is new to US culture, when I watched the movie, I had completely different, how can I say, observations. For instance, I never realized that sign when he fall was a Chris sign. I only realized that there was a relief on his face expression. It was kind of, he forgave himself, and as a result, I felt he was relieved. But this is the first time I realized, yeah, he had kind of a Chris sign, but I mean, I never, looked at that way. And the other thing is that him being not very close to his kids, it also did not surprise me, because that kind of reminded me about our dad figures in our culture. So the culture that I came from, dads are more tough. I mean, they are, how can I say, and masculine and etc. And the most important thing is that they are tougher to their own kids or own people rather than to other ones. I mean, they are always more kinder to the surrounding, but when they come home, they become, how can I say, they criticize more, because that's the way how they kind of improve you, or how they push you to be better and etc. So that's why that did not, I was not surprised to see that. But as the time passed, I'm saying that that's not the correct way of parenting. But when I watched it for maybe 4 years ago, I was not, surprised at all.
Thank you so much. Is it Umida, Yumida?
Umida, yeah.
Umida. Thank you so much for bringing that in and talking about the importance of continuous learning. Because you've come to this discussion, now you understand where that came from. I love learning. Najma, I will give you a chance, and then we'll move on to a different topic area, question-wise.
No, thank you, Primrose. My question has already been answered. That's okay. You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I mean, I have a whole list, but I want to give people a chance to ask. And if you've asked your question, you can lower your hand. You know how you raised it? There's a way that you can remove that, then I won't be confused. And maybe while people are putting their thoughts together, a very good question that came up was, what is the source of the characters' fear and mistrust of one another? Because clearly that's how the movie started out. And what's the source of that? Again, open to everybody, and of course the discussants.
It's human nature to fear or be suspicious or be alienated from what's called the other. You know, I mean, people have done it since the beginning of human civilization. In some cultures, that there are tribes, and the tribes think of themselves as human. They call themselves, we're the humans, and then the other tribes are not the humans. So unfortunately, it's human nature. And the people, who knows how Walt got along with his neighbors when they were living there, but chances are a lot of them worked for Ford too. And he knew them from work and they were friendlier. So maybe it seemed like these were people usurping his old friends and neighbors. And it probably was white flight, like somebody said. So I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and it was an Italian American neighborhood, and the whole city was changed with white flight. I mean, there were plenty of African Americans in the city, but then there were less and less white people because they left for the suburbs, and so that's probably what he witnessed. And these were the usurpers and the strangers and the people he didn't trust. Plus, they couldn't speak his language, so he couldn't really make any progress getting to know them.
So actually, I posed a question about white flight. Does everybody understand the term white flight? Okay, good. If you don't, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll explain it. Why didn't Walt and his wife do the same thing? Because clearly they were probably the only white people left in the neighborhood. Is it because they couldn't afford it? What was that about? We saw one of his sons home in a very affluent neighborhood. I'm sure they would have been able to take care of him. Yumida, is that your hand up or did you forget to put it down?
Yeah, again, as I said before, I mean, that figure, he did not, I mean, surprise me. Everything, I mean, it was very similar to our culture. For instance, I'm going to give you a current, I mean, example. I have many relatives in Ukraine and other countries, and they have been living there since they were born there. And although they know that there are so many bombs and everything going on, they don't want to leave their place because they cannot imagine about living in another place. So they feel like they belong there and they prefer to die on their own place. So I kind of felt the same psychology, I mean, in this movie.
Wow.
That's a really good point. You know, for the elderly, we talk about aging in place. His son and his wife were trying to put him in a senior's home, and he wasn't having any of that. I want to age and die in my home. So thanks for bringing that up. Any other comments? I'm looking out for hands up. I have two screens, so I have to go back and forth. So another question that came up was, how are the characters able to change their prejudiced views? And I thought a good way to start answering this question is, again, put in chat, unmute yourself. What are some of the prejudiced views the various characters had about one another's cultures? Okay, I'll set us off.
Can I ask Tom, what do you think, coming from your culture, do you have preconceived ideas about white Americans? Yeah, you.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, basically, you know, I mean, when at the point, at the time, I mean, if you based on the movie, I think what we look at, what happened is for the white people, for us, they are supremacists, you know. But at the same time, we also, you know, sometimes we say they're crazy. You know, so basically it's a mix of feeling, not the same. Because, you know, I mean, because some of them, like in the movie, what happened is sometimes you have the power, you are more knowledgeable, you got everything, but because the act bring you down. So I think it's to answer the question. It's a lot. It's very hard to answer that question. I mean, you can answer like, yeah, it's just a feeling. If the white person meet and like depend on each white person, not the same. I live in the Bronx, and I usually go to the Arthur Avenue, which is the old Italian, white Italian, also some of the Jewish mixed people. I mean, they are they are successful. They are rich compared to us. We have nothing. But sometimes, at the same time, they're very trash talking. They're the one themselves very trash talking, speaking trash. For us, we don't speak trash at all. We don't. So it's hard, you know. I mean, not all of them, but you go to the street, they are very trash. So, not. I mean, no way for us to tolerate. Say, oh, this is a good man, this is a bad man. You know, I mean, well, we look up to them because they're rich, they're successful, they are big, they are tall, they look nice, look handsome. For us, we are small, we are poor, we don't have anything, you know. But at the same time, we say, you know, they are trash.
Did you think that's true in every culture?
Depend, but I think yes.
Yeah.
I think yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would like to respond to your question, Linda. Typically, when we think about the West versus the rest of the world, so developed countries versus developing countries, we look at developed countries like here as being very individualistic. That's why Walt and his wife live in their home, as opposed to their neighbors who had their grandmother living with them. Very individualistic when it comes to the workplace. I should be the best, the biggest, the one to be noticed, as compared to more communal cultures, which will be, I can't forge my way ahead until everybody has come with me. Having said that, though, I am struck by what Tom had said. So there's two Toms in this discussion. So Tom, our discussant, when he talked about the fact that the Hmong immigrant populations are no longer as close-knit after they've lived here for a long time. You talked about the fact that they now do things on large scale. Rather than have people come into their home and develop those one-on-one relationships, it's more about almost like what we see in the States. So when we celebrate things like 4th of July, there's a big event. Everybody goes to that event. Some people have people over to the house. But assimilation, and I think globalization, is starting to change that whole concept of communalism in developing countries. Because as we look, like Tom said, as we look towards the West and we aspire to be like the West, sometimes we forget about the good things in our own cultures. The last thing that I will say is that in the developed world, there's not really an appreciation of indigenous ways of knowing, indigenous ways of being. So Walt, if he had not met his Hmong neighbors, may never have become a kind person who was able to sacrifice his life. And he learned that from these neighbors who come from an indigenous way of knowing, which is be kind to one another. He seems lonely, let's have him over. You remember the scene where the women were fussing over him when they were having the meal, right? So that's how they commune with one another. So those are the differences that I would say. But yeah, going back to my question, if there's no hands up, about prejudiced views. I asked, what prejudiced views? Let's maybe talk about Walt. What type of things did he say that showed he had those prejudiced views? For me, one of the main things was the whole notion of the minority myth. A couple of times in the movie, he talked about, oh, you're Asians, you're supposed to be smart. He said to Thao, count the birds. And Tao's confused, count the birds. And he's like, well, you're supposed to be smart, aren't you? And we talk about the minority myth, which is the idea that Asian Americans are all smart. And again, we have to look for individuals within stereotypical things. So people think, oh, all Asian kids at school are smart, they're good in math. There's so many that struggle with math, right? But unfortunately, we have this stereotypical view, and we put ourselves in danger when we believe in stereotypes instead of looking for the individual within those stereotypes. And I haven't heard from you. What other myths or other questions do you have? I see Madeline and Angelica, Sharon. Any other questions? Any other myths or prejudiced views that you saw, either from about the Hmong towards Walt or Walt towards the Hmong people? Sorry to put you on the spot. You can also put it in chat if you want to. Another thing I saw was how white people treat their elderly as compared to how the Hmong would treat their elderly, right?
Well,
think
I can contribute that to that
yes,
question. Basically, if you look very detailed in the movie, at one time, I mean, you know what he's doesn't. He is the family broken down because they have no good communication or many other issue before. But at last, he did call his son. It's meant to be. He wanted to reconnect it. He wanted to get some help. But he said to keep repeatedly telling him that I'm busy, I'm busy. See, that last resort, last act he did before he gave up the family. Comparison to the neighbor keep pounding on him with love, with care. It's a completely opposite act. So I mean, that changed his life, changed his idea, and changed his act. I mean, again, to answer your question also, this is what I said, and truly in my community, my own people. I'm right now, it's over 55 years old. And for us, for all of us, for many people like us, if you go to the nursing home, you don't see Vietnamese people there. We don't. You don't. Very rare. Because I myself take care of my father and my sister take care of my mom until they die. So basically, we do care because they give us life, we take care of their life. So regardless, we both, me and my wife, we have job, busy, I have 4 kids, we are very, very busy, but regardless, we all treasure our parents until they die. So I mean, it's different point of view, a different culture. And I see the American people, because the life, because they're busy, I mean, the minute they retire, you put them in the nursing home. That's what you get from nursing home. They get sick of it. And you know, I mean, we paint the picture. Oh yeah, you get take care of the healthcare. They feed you every day. It's a nice scenery. You have a nice building there. Somebody take care of you. But when they come getting old, they don't need those. They need attention from the children. They need a little attention. They need a little friend. They enjoy the talk. They don't need the fancy building. They don't need the fancy nurse coming every day. They don't need people feeding them. They don't need them. It's a different idea. So, I mean, to answer the question for us, until now, and back then, home right now, then our philosophy is, you know, they give us life. We repay them and make them happy until they die. That's our philosophy.
Thank you so much. I put something in chat that's referred to as filial piety, right? Now, I saw Anne was unmuted and Marilyn. Did you want to say something? Or were you just...
No, I was thinking less about what the prejudicial thoughts were toward each other and more about the process of overcoming those. And my field, psychology, there's a long line of research that just putting people together in the same space does not necessarily lead to reduced prejudice. It's putting people together in a similar space where they work together on some kind of common cause. And, you know, it seems to me that Walt, in observing the boy pick up the woman's groceries, saw a common cause. We can perhaps, maybe there's a possibility of having a community here. And when they started to work together on the car, of course, that was a very dynamic common cause for them. But you see this dynamic in a lot of public institutions. integrating schools in and of itself doesn't necessarily improve relations between two groups of people, but putting them in the same space together and giving them common projects, projects and causes to work on together is what makes the difference.
Thank you so much for sharing with regards to your expertise in that area. Absolutely. Marilyn, and then Umida.
On the question of whether Walt was a Jesus figure, I don't think he was so much a Christian savior as a white savior. And this is a trope in American cinema, a trope in American literature, that the white person comes in and solves a problem for a minority community. Actually, that was such an overpowering aspect of this movie that made me really turn off to the movie. If we really look at it, it was not Walt who integrated, it was Sue. Sue is the one who initiated the trans-cultural activities. She decided not to take offense at the insults when he said, you know, is this dog? And she said, no, we only eat cats. So she was the one who seemed to have the greatest cross-cultural understanding. And if you want to say, I think I'm going to read into this because I don't think it was such a noble movie. There's a great emphasis on macho, but if you think about what the feminine accomplished in this movie was greater than what the men accomplished. It was Sue who initiated the understanding. It was the women who did all the cooking, who, you know, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. So they were the ones who created community. They were the ones who brought the flowers and put the food at his stairs. I think this movie is full of tropes that I didn't appreciate. There was not only the white savior trope, but also the foreigners value family and we don't value family. There was the notion of minorities being part of violent gangs. We saw an Hispanic gang, we saw Black bullies, and we saw Hmong gangs. That was all we saw of minority culture. They were all gangs. And yes, there was a perhaps still active, a very violent Hmong gang in California and also in the Midwest. But for this movie to introduce us, if you will, to the Hmong culture by bringing a gang into it, I think was extremely racist. So this idea of Walt with his American flag and representing America, working in the Ford factory, being, you know, this is my ground, I will not leave it kind of attitude. As to the position of him when he was shot, how a body falls after being what? How many, did he get 30 or 40 rounds of shot in him? Yeah. It wasn't just 2 or 3. This was an extraordinary, extravagant violence of excessive and unnecessary cinematographic unnecessary. How you fall is one thing, but whether the photographer decides to shoot you in a hands out position is another thing. He's the director of the movie. Clint Eastwood put that shot in there, pun on the word shot, for a reason. He wanted himself to be seen as, if not a Jesus figure, certainly as a savior figure. And thank you, America. We have had 25 too many white savior movies. Okay, that's my rant.
Marilyn, we are so excited to have you in this discussion. You say this is your first one, calling it out as it is. If anybody has a direct response to Marilyn's points that she made, please ask them now, because I think this is a very important nugget of the movie. When you mentioned Sue, I said, oh my goodness, how could I have forgotten to talk about Sue? I read an article, they say she is the most intelligent person in the film, and she is able to read Walt. She's unruffled by his early insults. Sue is superb at playing the language game, right? So she is a powerful character. When I read this, I wrote in the margins, War Mandla. I don't know if I've told people at WIN about this term. It's a Zulu term, and I'm putting it in. We talk about Amandla, means power. And when you put WOM in front of the word Amandla, you get Womandla, as in woman power. Too many times we forget about the power of women. And that's why towards the end of this movie discussion is when we suddenly remember women. In Africa, we talk about the fact that the man is the head of the house, but the woman is the neck. She determines how that head turns, right? They were responsible for
It's a
bringing
good
that.
one.
Absolutely. And now this is so funny. Yumida, I don't know if you will agree with me. I lived in the United Arab Emirates for 1 year. And I remember going there and having these stereotypical views about Muslim women. And imagine my surprise when I found them to be smart and funny and strong. And I remember telling them about this saying, and they were so excited. They said, in Arabic culture, we say the same thing. The man is the head of the house, but the woman is the neck. She determines how that head turns, right? Linda, you wanted to say something, and then Yumida will give you a chance.
I want to respond to Marilyn because I couldn't agree more. Now, when my husband mentioned that, I said that Clint Eastwood was in the traditional, one of the last of the real old-fashioned Hollywood styles. In classic Hollywood movies, there sometimes are strong women, but almost always they get punished for that. And you could see that that's what happened to Sue. She was strong and she was brave, but she got screwed up in the end by them beating her up. And who knows what happened to her after that. Probably she wasn't so strong and brave anymore, or maybe she was, but that's what happens. I mean, Katharine Hepburn she was strong, and then something bad would happen, like the guy would want to divorce her. So this is a trope of Hollywood classic films. As far as the white savior, that's another one. And remember, most of Clint Eastwood's films were not about immigrants. They were usually white on white. So he could do white on white. He just he didn't know how to do it with immigrants. He had to still do white on, he had to do this thing he was used to doing. So it's a classic movie, and the white savior is a classic Hollywood, trope, just like you said. And Clint Eastwood is in the Hollywood tradition. So I totally agree with you. And that is very offensive. And let me say one more thing. I read an article by a Hmong person, no offense to Tom, but this person said that Hmong culture was misrepresented. They said that the animism wasn't like they showed it, that the shaman was not like they showed it, that the food wasn't accurate. I mean, this was written by a Hmong person who was a scholar. And what else did she say? She just said, just like you said, that you're going to show our culture by gangs. I mean, gangs and a weak family that can't protect itself till the white guy comes along. So the person I read, one of the many articles I read, did not like the way they portrayed Hmong culture. You're right about the white savior, and it's classic Hollywood. The woman gets published, the white guy saves everybody. It's classic.
May I add to that, and in sort of a weird defense of Clint Eastwood as a director. I think that he knew exactly what he was doing. I think that he advanced the image of the white savior with full knowledge that it could bring this discussion about. And I get the feeling that he would not object to that it was part of the narrative that he intended to advance in this particular movie. And there was something else I wanted to add to what Linda mentioned. Was it about the director? And I can't remember. I'm sorry, but it's left my mind. So, but it's again, I liked the movie. I thought it was it had value to it, and certainly I'm in full agreement as to the role of Sue. I think that she was the interpreter. She was the mediator between both cultures, and an invaluable asset to the movie. And let us not forget that she is also a creation of the director in this particular movie as well.
Thank you, Joseph. Yumita, you had something to say, and just before I pass that over to you, we have 6 more minutes, I believe. So Linda and Tom, I would like you to have the last word based on the discussion we've had. But over to you, Yumita, then it will be Linda, Tom, and then any lingering last questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. I'm just actually Marilyn has put it so well that's what I was about to say. I mean, I think it's wrong to generalize, like saying that Western people do not value their families, or Eastern people do have more family values, and etc. I also do not agree on that, because there are always individualistic examples. Like, for instance, we always had a stereotype against nurseries, but at the same time, keeping the family among a very populated, families, or not every children may have a chance to be able to take care of their parents. And it's something cultural, and it should not be, how can I say, criticized. So, for instance, I know so many families in our culture that are forced to live with their kids or with their grandkids, because it's a shame to live separate or to live alone. And this is also another extreme. So as you said, everything is kind of cultural, and you cannot criticize the other people by just looking from the side. So I loved what Marilyn said, and I totally agree with her.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, Tom, any last comments? And then over to Linda, and then lingering comments from everybody.
Yes, a couple of things that I'm sorry to if I lead you to a misunderstanding as a criticize. I did not criticize. It is, for example, is a culture. That's what I present, and then it's not like I criticize. No, I did not. So is it because the culture like that, and we feel very strong to do what we're supposed to do? That's what I meant. And also, the movie, the way they presented, the Hmong people, I believe it. I'm not a Hmong people, but I feel like the movie they misrepresent the move of, or the picture or the act. Yes, it does. But I agree one thing, that with the movie, the moral, I agree with the moral. It came out very good. It's the moral, the story, pretty okay, pretty good. That's why I agree. So of course, I watch a movie a number of times, and then I see, it's pretty good movie. I tell my kid to watch, and please watch more than one time to understand and to see the moral, the story out of it. That's what I encourage my kid to watch the movie.
I agree. Okay, so do you want me to give a wrap up here? Well, first of all, this group has been brilliant, and the comments have been wonderful, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of it. So thank you very much, everybody that's part of WIN. But I wanted to add one more comment about aging, which all of us are probably thinking about quite a bit, and whether your kids take care of you or not. Just remember that in a lot of families, when they had a number of kids, there was often one person, always a woman, that was sacrificed to take care of the elderly people. And part of women's liberation was that, we decided that wasn't really fair. And but it was nice to stay with the family. My grandmother lived with us until she died, and it wasn't always easy, actually, because she became very difficult. So my mother was the one that suffered, and she was the daughter-in-law. She wasn't even the daughter. In fact, she was a different religion from my grandmother, and my grandmother hated her. So it was not a pleasant situation. So there's a lot of sacrifice that goes on. I think it's wonderful if you have a family that gets along and they take care of the aging parents. To me, that's an ideal. But there's always there was a dark side to it, and the woman was the one that bore the brunt. The young woman, usually the daughter-in-law, often, or the daughter. But anyway, thank you for the wonderful comments, and this has been very stimulating, and I really appreciate everybody's participation.
Thank you for those last few comments. So much stuff to discuss. It's incredible. So as we wrap up, I see Marilyn, you are unmuted. I had put there a note for Tom, Angelica, and Madeline, who we haven't heard from. If you want to say anything, I'd just like to give everybody a chance before we wrap up. And Linda, do you want to talk about the next event coming up?
Yes, and it is just around the corner. So next Sunday, we will be watching the movie, or if you haven't already done so, Dancing in Java. And it's a documentary. It's not a long one, but a lot of meat, because there's a lot to discuss in there, because you do have the different religion. You've got Jewish and Muslim, and how this dancer brought the children together. It's just a wonderful story. But and our two speakers, I'm really excited about too. Marlene is a dancer herself, as well as she's part of the Jewish faith. And then we have a young lady who is part of the Muslim faith, and she's an attorney. So it should be very interesting. So I welcome and hope all of you get signed up. We'd love to have you with us next Sunday, same time.
Wonderful.
And spread the news. Everybody send an email out to your friends.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So on that note, if there are no other comments, I want to thank everybody for their participation. This has been a pleasant evening dealing with continuous learning, learning more about each other, learning how to make our world a better place one person at a time. So we will see you hopefully next week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Linda. We appreciate
Thank you.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.